Philip Taulelei is an international security expert. He was a former Australian Special Air Services soldier where he specialised in parachute operations. Since leaving the Australian Army in 1997, he has worked in director, manager and senior advisory roles in the security industry, and particularly specialises in hostile environments and terrorism.
My interest in security started when I was doing a fitting and tuning apprenticeship in Wellington, New Zealand, and I had an opportunity to join the territorial forces like Army Reserve, and that piqued my interest. There were some really exciting things you could do. I started off as a field engineer for 6th Field Battalion, Paddy Street, Petone. As a field engineer, I learned about explosives, mine warfare, demolitions, booby trap, firefighting, bridging, and water supply. Pretty much all the jobs that were left over in the Army that no one could think of a place to put them. I first joined the military in 1981 in New Zealand as a territorial field engineer for 6th Field Squadron, Paddy Street, Petone. I thoroughly enjoyed being an engineer, but later on I joined the Australian Regular Army in 1985 as an infantry soldier. Interestingly, in Kapooka, they put you through this aptitude testing to determine what your characteristics and traits lead you towards as far as capacity is concerned for employment. My brother and I joined at the same time. They have what's called a green sheet. There's the 72 major roles that the military can assign you. If you lack certain competencies or characteristics, they will remove you from certain roles. My brother George and I both had clean green sheets. We could do any one of all 72 jobs, and our first choice was infantry. Some people were quite surprised by that because they thought, well, what do you want to go to the infantry for? You can do anything you like. But truth is, infantry needs smart guys too. And 12 years, I never looked back. We had a great time. After finishing our basic training in Kapooka, we did our initial employment training at Singleton as infantry soldiers. And that's when my brother and I split up. He stayed in Singleton with 10 Independent Rifle Company, and I went down to the 3rd Battalion, which was the Parachute Battalion. One of the platoon sergeants we had, who he liked me, but he'd worked out that I had a fear of heights, so they sent me to a Parachute Battalion. So I had to face that monster pretty quickly and deal with it. I failed my first parachute course from injury in early 86, and then came back to complete it again in 87. And in the end, I actually ended up doing over 680 something parachute descents. I went on to become a parachute jump instructor, a freefall instructor, and just my career just took off as far as parachuting was concerned. I found it fascinating because the physics involved. I started doing my private pilot license because there are a lot of complementary aspects. The good thing about doing the basic aeronautical knowledge, I learned about flight physics, aerodynamics, which parachute all impact the parachute. Meteorology was another big part. So that private study of mine and flying aircraft helped me to develop on some of my more advanced parachuting courses. And I took it all the way to the top. I eventually qualified as a freefall instructor, which I really enjoyed, because you're taking people who come straight off the street, they don't know much, and you're teaching them everything they know. And essentially what you're doing is you're teaching them how to fly their own body. We'll learn about symmetry, how to push themselves through the sky. And you can do the theory on that all you like, but at some point it's time to get out the back of the aircraft and practice it in the sky. And being able to give people confidence and knowledge and take them from a raw product to something pretty good is good. One of my earliest lessons as a jump instructor, I passed a lesson. It was my very first flight training lesson, and the instructor said to me at the end of it, technically, he said, that was one of the best lessons I've ever seen delivered. I thought, great. It felt pretty good, I covered all the teaching points. He said, but I failed you. I thought, what? How could you fail me when you said technically it was great? He said, you didn't sell it. There was no sparkle, there was no flair, you didn't sell yourself to me. He goes, your job's a salesman. I thought, get out of here. I'm learning to be a parachute jump instructor, not a salesman. I was furious, but I only had 10 minutes to prepare for my next lesson, and so away we went, parked that, moved on. Came back to it. I thought about it that night, and I thought, you know what, he's right. I had to sell confidence to the students, confidence in me, that I knew what I was talking about, confidence in the parachute systems that we were using in the aircraft, but most importantly, I had to sell them confidence in their own ability to assimilate the training we gave them, then trust all of those systems with their life, put a parachute on, get in a plane and jump out of it. I thought, all right, I'm a salesman. So that stuck with me pretty much for my entire security career. I learnt that that and one scene in this that movie Dust Boot about the submarine, where the first mate grabs the commanding officer and gives him a tune-up and says, "Don't you ever tell the men you don't know what's going on," because of that confidence, that lack of confidence. Those lessons stuck with me, and I realised it doesn't matter where you go and what you're doing. If you don't have the confidence and you don't have a plan and you don't know where you're going, no one's going to follow you. So I used that in good stead for quite a few different incidents. Learning the parachute in the Australian Defence Force in the mid-80s was a very interesting time. The parachute school just moved from Williamtown down to Nowra. The systems that we were using were changing and evolving. When I first joined the military, we were wearing greens. When I first jumped out of an aeroplane, we were carrying it was called the Carrying Straps Personal Equipment Parachutist, CSPEP. That old harness and straps system, that was from the Second World War. We were doing it hard. We learnt quite a lot, but some people got hurt along the way. Both my first two promotions came through attrition. Where 1987, Craig Barry Bateman, my 2IC for my section, he had a parachute malfunction. He came right past me. We'd done it was a large battalion plus drop. We'd gone into DZ Silver Plains, 17th of October 1987, and it was they do what's called a tack load, where they'll take a group of people that need to land on the ground in the same place, and they don't put them all in one aeroplane. They divide them into the same part of various aeroplanes. So this was 8 aircraft, and so our section was split across 8 aircraft, but we're all on the left-hand side, round about number 14 or 15. So I got out the door, and as each successive aircraft came through, our section got out of the aircraft in and around the same place. Beto had a mail and came flapping through the whole lot of us, and I watched his parachute go all the way down and hit the ground. I thought, boy, that was hard. So I steered towards him, got over there, and he was hurt pretty bad. I got to him about the same time, started to disconnect his harness and his parachute. At the same time, the medics turned up. I realised there's not much I could really do medically compared to the work they were doing. So I packed up all my gear and moved into the rally point. In the 20 minutes it took for me to move off the drop zone, find the other guys and get to our rally point, Beto had passed away. And so that's where I was informed. I'd just been promoted to Lance Corporal, and Beto was no longer with us. So the first attrition promotion. Second one, we went into a place called Brundee, 1989. Similar job, large mass drop, but there were some freak wind conditions when we got out of the aircraft. So down on the ground, the winds were fine, but just at 1,000 feet, it was a completely different story. It was really freak wind conditions. Got out of the aircraft, looked down, and have you ever looked out the window of an aircraft when you're coming into land and you just watch the threshold and the ground go rushing past you and you think, geez, we're moving quickly? Well, I had the same experience, but this time I was under parachute, and I thought, boy, the biggest challenge for me was, and my immediate thoughts were, I'm a parachute jump instructor. If I hurt myself on this, where's my credibility? No one's going to follow my lead ever again. So I did exactly what we were trained to do, locked it in, turned it off, and my first landing was perfect, textbook. Hit the ground, rolled over, and then bounced straight back up into the air. Then I landed flat on my back like a sack of potatoes, and I heard this thumping noise to look down and see my combat equipment with a rifle taped to the side of it rolling and leap into the air coming straight towards me. I've braced myself for impact with that. When my parachute's reinflated and whack, I've taken off across the ground again. Collapsed my parachute, got up, fortunately I was okay, and found out that we had a lot of people injured on that jump, and so exercise was off. It turned into a rescue mission, and we just moved around. We spent the entire night looking for injured people. One guy we found, only after the sun had gone down, just noticed this little glow over in the corner. What's that? Little green glow. So 3 of us were moving over in the general direction to find out what the heck that was. He'd busted both of his legs, but both of his ankles were pretty smashed up. And he couldn't make it back up to the drop zone. So he'd taken out one of those siloam sticks, snapped it, and he's throwing it up in the air, then crawling over to it, then throwing it up in the air again to get people's attention. Well, it worked. 72 guys, I think, that night went to hospital with some fairly serious injuries, bilateral fractured femurs, broken backs, and after that jump I became a platoon sergeant. Great career progression, some tough lessons learned the hard way. Yeah, but I think when you're in the military you kind of plan for that. You know, the bench is always warm. One of the things they teach soldiers is you always understudy 2 up. You know, and my job as a section commander or as a platoon sergeant was to teach the guys below me, because attrition's part of the plan. And so you take those military lessons for attrition, you have a look around a civilian organisation and you think, well, what happens if Jonesy gets hit by a bus? What are we going to do about that? If he doesn't come into work tomorrow because he's got COVID, what's our fallback plan? And so I think military guys get it. They're always thinking about redundancy, attrition. They have contingency planning. It's part of our DNA. And if it's not, it'll get smashed into you pretty quickly. 12 years in the military, yeah, it's definitely a part of my DNA now.